Thanks, everyone. I'll begin now. I know just a few people are still coming back in from voting. We'll just ask that they could come in quietly before we begin. I'd like to welcome, first of all, an extraordinary guest who has become a real hero to the party recently for his efforts in supporting us at the UBCM convention. First, could we please give a warm welcome to Whistler's own mayor, Mr. Melamed. I had the privilege of meeting his worship a few months back on a trip up to Whistler there, where we came to talk to him about what was going on at a municipal level in terms of green politics. This is a mayor whose political history spans a very interesting dynamic, and he'll speak more to it, but as a city councilor, you were, of course, opposed to the Olympics, weren't you, sir? Of course, he would go on to become what I think will be known as the greenest mayor in the city's history, or the municipality's history. But of course, now he has been saddled with the responsibility, and I think the honor of being the mayor of the host city, or one of the host cities. It's certainly a controversial topic for Greens here within our own party. I don't think necessarily that we're divided. For me, it's been an easy thing to determine after the fact. I support a green Olympics at this point, and I've come out publicly in favor of a green Olympics, short of actually canceling and moving backwards, which is an impossible train to stop. It's important right now that we try to lead by example here provincially, and there's no one more able to that task, of course, than his worship. I'm going to ask him to speak about some of the things he's been doing in Whistler, what's going on with him. He'll be giving a presentation this evening to talk about some different themes, but what we'd like him to do is tell us what's going on with you in Whistler, talk about green politics. I'd be honored if you'd share with us your honest and sincere assessment of the party at present provincially. And then we're going to open the floor to questions for Ken, and you'll have a chance to throw some directly at him. Again, he was instrumental when we came to him in the build-up to our UBCM lobbying. And Jane mentioned guts in politics, and I liked how you said that, Jane, and I really agree with you. At a time when we're so lacking leadership and green leadership and independent thought, when we approached him and I reached out and said, would you consider supporting this motion, he didn't even hesitate. He said, yeah, absolutely, he'd do it. And we talked to a lot of mayors, we talked to a lot of city councilors, and everybody wants to do the right thing, and everybody wants to help Greens, and they're all cheering for us. But when it came time to stand up and say, this is a motion that this committee needs to consider, and the UBCM needs to recognize this party, only 2 mayors were the first to put their hands up, and I don't want to be remiss to mention his worship, Mayor Sam Sullivan in Vancouver, who showed tremendous leadership as well. So, you know, whether you like it or not now, Ken, you're a hero in this party, and you did the unthinkable for us when it put yourself in a political position where everything is politics at UBCM, and we're so grateful for that. We're honored to have you here. We'll look forward to your speech tonight. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, I'll call the floor Whistler's Mayor, Mr. Melamed.
Thanks very much, Christopher. That's a great introduction. I'm a little humbled by it. I'm glad you did reference Sam Sullivan, because he actually probably had a greater leap to get over to bring that to the floor and actually inspire me to take a more aggressive approach, because the first reaction from UBCM was rather negative. But it was, it wasn't hard for me to do, because part of the message, and if Jane referenced courage, that's what people are crying out desperately in British Columbia for: leaders. It is what has been most absent from our political system. You go running to your council and they don't want to hear or listen to you talk. So we do need leaders who are consistent and principled and act as they say. And for me, so it was not a challenge, because I have been talking about and forever supported green politics and democratic process. So, and really the rationale was, we need all voices to the table. The best decisions arrive when all voices are at the table, and the debate is the fullest and richest. So unfortunately we were defeated. It was a close vote. The fact that we were defeated, I don't think should be taken as a negative signal. It means that next year it's going to be a little bit easier, and there's a couple of ideas and approaches, and I'm sure we'll be in communication with the party as the months tick away to next year's UBCM. I thought I'm going to give an address and on some other thoughts tonight, but I thought I'd maybe just update you a little bit on my first 2 years in office. It's been very, very exciting, and some of the things that Whistler's journey to sustainability has brought to its door, not the least of which is the Olympics. But you know, some of the partnerships in working with Natural Step International, International Center for Sustainable Cities, Nola Kate Seymour's group. We're members of the Plus Cities Network. The ICSC has created a worldwide organization of 50 cities sharing information and knowledge, best practices about long-term sustainability plan. Whistler's one of those cities, Calgary is one, Olympia, but cities like Dar es Salaam in Tanzania and Iqaluit in Nunavut. I was fortunate enough, one of the things that has been a tremendous thrill for me, not just to represent Whistler, but to be able to go around the world literally and talk about sustainability and some of the things we're doing. And invited up to Iqaluit to help the mayor up there, Elizabeth Shuyapik, who gets sustainability and the need to plan long term and get consensus within her community about what those definitions are. It's an enormous challenge, and I bless her soul. She's amazing. The energy and the commitment, the vision, the courage, you know, to stand up when nobody else wants to talk about sustainability. They have problems you can't imagine. And yet she understands the benefit and the need to think long term and to do that kind of planning. So that's really the role for the Green Party. And frankly, I mean, well, you know that. The reason you're here is you know that British Columbians are crying out for this voice, for leadership in this area, to have a more balanced political debate. I think, Frank, you asked me to be frank, I think frankly the Green Party hasn't yet realized its full potential and hasn't met the true test. I think more people will come to the party, and now there has never been a better time. Gosh, who could have imagined a year ago George Bush admitting that climate change was happening? There is a time for hope. And yet, one of the things that has challenged me is, you know, I've been in the movement, I guess, for about 20 years. There's probably some of you here have been in longer. I think by all accounts, people say that the environmental movement started in 1970. And if you think about all those wasted years, we haven't come far enough, not nearly. So even while there's room for hope, it's not a time to back off. We need to keep putting out strong voices and clear messages to continue to advance the agenda. In fact, we wasted so much time, we actually need to go much more accelerated now. Some of the other things Whistler's doing, we just adopted a green building code because when we went out looking for one, there wasn't one for residential building. LEED has been well developed and recognized for commercial buildings, but for residential building and green building, there wasn't anything. So we actually were able to convince a developer to contribute $15,000 as part of his rezoning and a commitment to doing green building on his project. But we hired a consultant to develop a pilot, and now we have a working document. Council's endorsed it. The challenge now is to get to the implementation phase. So we're starting voluntary, but in the new year we already expect that we're going to make some parts of it mandatory. And within a year, I expect that it will be not optional. Anybody who's building a house in Whistler will have to use this document and meet. It's based on a point system, and you'll have to hit a certain number of points before you get your building permit. I think one of the other big advances that's happened in the last year, I don't know if any of you have heard of our Whistler 2020 document. It's what we call our long-term sustainability plan. It was a lot of years in the making. The final phase, the third phase, was the monitoring phase. And we finally got our monitoring up and running probably in the spring. It's called Whistler 2020. It's got its own website, Whistler 2020 Explorer. And so, you know, there's a lot of euphemisms about monitoring, but, you know, there's the one that what gets measured gets done. But the other part of that is the accountability factor. So we put up what our emissions are. We put up what our affordability are. And it's up there for everybody to reference, the world, in fact, thanks to the internet. And then we tie it back to our sustainability principles. And we have arrows and metrics that tell us whether we're going towards our shared description of success or away from that description. And so when we're going away, then that's a mandate for our town and our partners to get busy. That leads me to another part of our success, and what I think is tremendously important for all of us, is to think about the situation that we're in a collaborative one. We can't do it by ourselves. We can't be lone rangers. It doesn't matter if Whistler becomes sustainable or Whistler has an environmental strategy. Who cares? It's the world that needs that kind of action, and if we don't all get it together, grateful for the fact that our community has recognized that. And one of our motivating principles or factors in adopting long-term sustainability is not just to do well for Whistler, but to inspire the rest of the world. We are actually in a very unique place. We have over 2 million visitors a year from around the world. Well, we're going to try and take advantage of that. We want to try and send messages back for the people who visit, to take back to their towns and try and inspire their leaders to get to advance sustainability and environmental stewardship. That's something we think is very important and really an obligation. You know, if we don't do that, we're turning our back on a responsibility that was given to us. Or we've created, actually, I'll take some credit. We created a world-renowned resort. You know, Christopher mentioned that sort of the same breath you talk about the Olympics, good or bad, Whistler, good or bad. We take a lot of criticism, we take a lot of heat. But we are what we are. When I became mayor, the resort was built. It's not an option to tear down what's built there. You know, you have to take what you've got and work with it. In fact, business needs to know that you're going to respect their investment and that change will occur in the time frame that they can modify their business practices. But we're very clearly saying to them, expect to modify, because business as usual is not an option. Current business practices are taking us in a catastrophic direction, so we need to change. They've agreed with that. They also like the fact that we're not telling them they're going to have to shut down tomorrow, or go to zero emissions, or this, that, or the other. What could be described as a draconian action, but we can't do those things. We can work only through the time, and as other orders of government allow. So we, Whistler, for instance, and towns don't control, and provinces don't control things that are of a national agenda. So there lies part of the challenge. And maybe I'll just wrap up with the thought that in my 2 years, and I guess in my 20 years of environmental activism, and 2 years as mayor, I spent a lot of time trying to change what some people call higher order of governments. Those of us in local government try not to rank them. We think we're the highest order at local government. So there are other orders. I've spent a lot of time trying to change things at the national and provincial level, and even the local level. And I've not given up, but chosen to focus 99% of my efforts at the local level. And I'm convinced now that if we do that, we can be more successful. Because we've actually been spinning, go back to that question. Why have we not gotten anything done for 36 years, since 1970? I think because we've been misfocusing our efforts. There's some other ideas and thoughts I have for tonight, but that's one of them, is if we can get it right in our local communities, then the other orders of government will have no choice but to follow. So I'll open up to questions with that.
Yeah, thank you. Ken Melamed. Can I throw the first question out too?
Sure.
Yeah. We'll do it, and please just make sure you stand up when you do your questions, speak clearly so everyone can hear it, and so to try to allow room for him to answer it as quickly as we can for the most. My first question is, you and I have talked about a Green Olympics and minimizing the footprint on the mountain and at the events or the venues where it's going to happen, and the potential to translate that around the world. Will other host cities that win the Olympics find that that is cost effective? And do you think that that's realistic? It sounds good and we want to do it, but how expensive and how difficult has that been for you to do?
The Olympics would be a whole hour or day presentation. But I think the simple answer to your question is, I think we're an example of how you can do it and be cost effective. It can be done. The bad news is that the IOC doesn't quite get it that far yet. We'll remember that the Lillehammer Games, was 92, was the first games where the IOC actually had a third pillar to its movement. It was sport, culture, and they added environment in '92. It was a breakthrough. Since Lillehammer, we've seen some environmental disasters. The Sochi Games, the next games, could possibly be the biggest disaster. The Russians have no commitment to environmental sustainability. So the record of the IOC hasn't been exemplary. But back to the point that I finished with, I think our hope is, I think Vancouver and Whistler's shared hope is that if we can demonstrate that you can do a games using very strong a real commitment to sustainability and green, then it sets a best case for others. It shows others the way, and perhaps the IOC will start to raise the bar on other bids. But they won't raise the bar until the world insists on it. Quite frankly, the delegates who vote on, the voting process has nothing to do with environmental sustainability or anything else. It's entirely political. And in fact, there's nobody that can get inside the heads of the delegates. Some of the votes are as crass as my wife wants to go on vacation there in that year. Or, you know, Europe got it last year, Asia gets it this year. What about the time delay for the advertising? Those are the things that decide on who gets the games, not the quality of the bid. But again, we need to set, and we have, you know, one of the points I will make is that when Whistler decided to engage, we asked our community, okay, we know there's some risk. We know there's concern about hosting the Olympics. Let's develop together a set of guiding principles so you know very clearly what the terms of engagement are going to be with VANOC and the organizing committee and then the IOC and all the bid partners. So we developed a one-page set of guiding principles. They're available on our website. And one of them, and amongst them, was commitment to sustainability. We're going to apply sustainability principles to everything we do in the games. Our partners were forced to accept that and adopt that. And actually, to their credit, VANOC has a massive department committed just to sustainability. Some of the best thinkers and leaders in British Columbia and Canada are committed to putting on their definition of what a sustainable games is. It's not mine, but it's better, I think, than we'll ever see. And we're hoping there's now some talk about changing getting the IOC to move the environment as a third pillar and rename it and rebrand it sustainability.
Thanks.
Okay, I'd be interested in this.
Ian Gregson, Vancouver, Hastings. It's interesting to hear your criteria for a Green Olympics. I'd like you to tell us personally what your green criteria is, what that constitutes. For many of us in this room, that criteria has come and gone when Eagle Ridge Plus was destroyed. It's also come and gone if they ever implement this gateway plan, which is related to the Olympics. So I'd like you to tell us at what point will that criteria be passed? What for you to say this is not a Green Olympics?
I told you they'd be fun today.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question because definitions are very important. But let me I'll make one point that to be successful in politics, we have to learn to compromise. So hard and fast is hard to do. When we asked VANOC to commit to green or sustainable Olympics, their response was things like zero emissions, carbon neutral, zero waste, not zero emissions, carbon neutral, things like zero waste, lead accreditation for their venue structures, and things that they felt that were within their control. It's a fascinating thing that happens around there. The highway to Whistler was not, at the time of the bid, had nothing to do with the Olympics. Now, 2 years later, people seem to have forgotten that they said that, and everybody agrees that it was done for the Olympics. Same with the Canada Line. The Premier will tell you that Canada Line had nothing to do with the Olympics, but it has everything to do with the Olympics. It's a way for governments to justify spending money. But, you know, we have to take advantage where we can take advantage. So back to Christopher when he asked this question, one of the things we did very consciously with VANOC, for instance, and I think this is an incredible achievement, but it doesn't get talked about, is downsize the games. So in Norway, when they have a ski jumping competition, 60,000 people show up. In Whistler, there'll be 15,000. So who's the mathematician here? What's the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions resulting from a 1/4 the size of the number of people? Pretty easy to calculate. So we have massively downsized the games and said, you know what? We don't need to have 60,000 people at those events. The rest of them can watch on TV. We'll move what is going to look good on camera and what is acceptable to the IOC and the sports federations. They were happy with 15,000. We made a compact games. Instead of Albertville, Nagano, Torino to a degree, actually Torino to a massive degree, spreading the games out like a spider's web and trying to include as many communities as possible within the IOC rules are about 2 hours of the games. We decided 2 venues, Vancouver, Whistler. So there again, you can imagine the reduced travel. 2 athletes' villages, no need to move athletes back and forth. 2 medals plazas, no need to move athletes back and forth. All kinds of upstream decisions to make the game's footprint smaller. Question is, are the games sustainable? Probably not. Are the games going to continue into the near future? Absolutely. So if you're going to have games, let's do them as green as we can. And you hope that you continue to move the bar forward. In this case, our commitment is really serious. We're doing everything we can. Our athletes' village in Whistler will have a district energy system heating the homes. The energy system was going to be done with ground source heat supplemented by natural gas. We looked at it and said, hey, you know what, it's close to the sewage treatment plant. We're going to take waste heat from the sewage treatment plant, pipe it over, and the supplementary energy comes from capping the landfill, which we closed, and so it's coming from methane gas. So, I mean, we are pushing the envelope in every way. After the games, the 250 units that will be left on site and during the games will house about 3,000 athletes. It's going to be turned into a resident neighborhood community of 1,500. 85% as a minimum, and we're shooting for 100% of those homes will be resident restricted. So not affordable, not social housing, but Whistler's definition of affordability. I guess simply put, half to 1/3 of market value. And nobody else has done that. Nobody's doing that. Vancouver couldn't fulfill their commitment to 20% social housing and part of their athletes' village. So we are pushing the envelope in ways that the IOC has never done and VANOC has never done. And frankly, they're now standing up and taking credit for it. I'm proud of it. A fantastic innovation up at the Nordic Center. They used a number of innovative practices, among them composting they chipped all of the land clearing debris that they couldn't bury. And the burying actually is an environmental win as well. But I won't go into that much detail. But this company called Denbo created these tunnels and composted on site, and then they recently just sprayed the site. It looks beautiful. They've reduced the waste. We didn't let them burn. So there's an example. The province and the highway construction burns all their land clearing. We didn't allow VANOC to burn. They told us they were going to burn. We said, no, you're not going to burn. We had it written in the agreement. You respect sustainability commitments and principles, and burning isn't in there. So that's the power of setting out in front what your principles are. There is some tension back and forth, and there are some things that we're not going to be able to do. One of the things it doesn't look like we're going to do is have an environmental protected area legacy with the games, even though our local environmental group tried very hard to do that. Again, VANOC has to be mindful of its sphere of influence, and there are pressures you can imagine from all sides. I like to think we are going to put on the most sustainable games ever. I sure hope so, because I've kind of staked my reputation on it. And I can tell you we've had some pretty stressful and tense conversations about what those expectations are. But already, LEED buildings, carbon neutral, zero emissions, downsized games, massive, massive wins.
We've got time for 3 or 4 here. If you can be more than a minute, so we can get 3 or 4 more.
Okay, I'll try and keep it short.
Sorry, I just want to make it last.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm just wondering if you'll still be mayor when the next UBCM meeting rolls around.
The next UBCM, yes, and actually I'm glad you mentioned it, because I need to get re-elected in 2008 to be there for the games. Christopher, you assumed I would be there for the games. It's not an assumption I can make.
I told you to call me, I'll work a campaign.
Things are tracking well. But next UBCM is in Penticton, and I'll be there.
Oh, good.
I haven't missed the UBCM since I've been an elected official.
Okay, Stuart, next on the list.
Yeah, Ken, I really appreciate all the work you're doing at the kind of real politic level to change attitudes amongst the business community. However, leaving aside the games, like the whole concept of Whistler is environmentally, in terms of, carbon footprint, and it's very, very expensive that people have to fly around the world to come and then drive up to Whistler and then be mechanically propelled up a mountain several times. And well, I'm sure, I don't have to tell you about this. So I'm just wondering whether are you trying to calculate Whistler's, ecological footprint and the carbon footprint, and are you taking this into account? And the other thing is, incrementalism is fine, you've got to start somewhere. But we are in a situation where the reality is that atmospheric carbon dioxide is still mounting inexorably. And we are faced with an impact of global warming. And so the real question I want to get at behind all this is what steps are you taking in your long-term vision to adapt to climate change? Because that's going to have a huge impact on a place like Whistler. And it's inevitable. We know that.
Excellent questions. The first part about Whistler's inherent unsustainability, in fact, could be an oxymoron, kind of like the Olympics being sustainable. But the fact is, it's there. This is the part of the world's problem. So, like the tar sands, it's an abomination. But if you look at the billions of dollars that are invested there, you can't imagine them shutting down tomorrow. So incrementalism is really the only way that we're going to get at these things. And what I'm hoping is that we'll get to that tipping point where we start talking about it, we build a sense of urgency, and that growing sense of urgency starts to accelerate the pace of change. That's all we can really hope for. Because there's no way in hell we're going to shut down Whistler or the tar sands, or pick any other unsustainable business. What are we doing to mitigate? That's why we started a long-term sustainability plan, because we were moving from an economic model that was unsustainable, that was based on growth. So that was about $150 million a year for 10 or 15 years as the village got built out to this massive size. And frankly, I wish they had listened when our environmental group first started saying, whoa, slow down, stop, enough is enough. But they built what they had committed because it couldn't be stopped, and now we are where we are. We have to work with what's today. I've talked about, and I get chastised for talking about the end of skiing. The ski resort doesn't like it when I say that. And in fact, Colorado areas who are at higher elevation than Whistler are already marketing the fact that they're at higher elevation. They're taking advantage of climate change and marketing it. So, we are trying to adapt our model so that we think of ourselves as a year-round destination resort with or without skiing. We will do that. The mountain will not be as successful, but the resort is actually quite diverse. And our summer season is more successful in terms of visitor numbers now than winter. So we don't need skiing. It generates a tremendous amount of revenue. And we will, over time, before the end of skiing, learn ways to adapt and modify. And to your point, will people be able to travel long distances? The tourism board doesn't like it when I say we should turn our focus from international to regional, because that's going to be the future. As airplane miles get harder and harder to log, we're going to have to look at new markets. What are those markets? Arguably, we will find a sustainable model, and the markets will adjust over time.
Okay, the last question goes to Jan.
JM, Vancouver. Ken, it's an honor to have you here. You mentioned compromise, and I'm wondering, as either a councillor or as mayor of Whistler, what was your most difficult compromise that you came up against? I know it's a tough one.
Great question.
Boy. What was there one? Probably the Olympics. I was opposing the Olympics for a number of reasons. I didn't say no as much as, you know, we need to be clear about what the terms are going to be. You know, to your question, I wanted some assurances that we were going to get it to be as green and sustainable as we wanted it to be. I was afraid that the machinery, the machine that the Olympics is, would overrun our town and force us to make, well, wouldn't give us the choice about decisions. And so, you know, I didn't support it in October of 2002, but interestingly enough, in November of 2002, I was reelected with the most votes on council. The community clearly wanted that voice at the table. In 2005, when I ran against a pro-development opponent, I was elected mayor, clearly supporting sustainability and I think to defend some of the strong guiding principles that we had. But I had to say to the community, I'm changing my perspective now. I can no longer oppose the Olympics. You have chosen the Olympics. That's a huge compromise for me to be able to say, look, we're going to put on the games and we're going to commit, and I'm going to stand up there and be excited about how great the games are going to be. Because you know what? Canada depends on that. It's not, don't forget, people, you can have all the negative opinions you want about the Olympics, but the world is coming to Vancouver and Whistler in 2010, and they're not going to care about, actually, frankly, they're probably not going to care about green, but they're going to take away impressions about Canada and Canadians that are important to us, and I think we want the world to be proud of what we've achieved. And my dream, and I think, you know, you can criticize me for it afterwards, but my dream is that we're going to deliver on our promise of showing the world how sustainable and how green and how forward and how committed we are to global change as a result of our participation in the Olympics.
Thank you again, Mayor Melamed. We really do appreciate that. I think it's a very important time for our party to have this discussion because the obvious impressions of it in the green parts aside, you're right, it's coming. You know, what can we do as a party to speak to making it green? How can we support you municipally? And again, on behalf of all 5 of the leadership candidates, thank you for your support at UBCM. It meant the world to us, and we'll really look forward to your presentation tonight. Thank you very much.